CBS News.
A craggy cleft between Spruce Peak and Mount Mansfield, a notch in the high Green Mountain spine of Lamoille County. This is Smuggler's Notch, a narrow gap from east to west that has been traveled for hundreds, if not thousands of years. This was the only supply link to Stowe and Waterbury after the flood of 1927. Alcohol came through here during Prohibition times, and during the War of 1812, Canadian contraband came south through here, while Vermont cattle went north to feed the British troops.
Good evening, I'm Marcellus Parsons, and this is the Channel 3 News for Friday, December 14th, 1990. Tonight we conclude our week in Lamoille County, part of our bicentennial broadcast, a week that we began on Monday in an art gallery in Stowe. Tonight we're on the Edwards Farm in Jeffersonville. It is a piece of land that Thomas Edwards first began farming in 1836. That was the same time that Lamoille County was created. This barn and these cows are just a couple of miles east of the infamous notch through the mountains. It's just down the road from Smuggler's Notch ski area that clings to the side of Madonna Mountain. The development spawned by that ski area has helped make the Edwards place one of only two working farms in this region, which is called South Cambridge. Sitting on the site of Sterling Ridge with cleared fields all around, the Edwards place is usually windy. Not so tonight, but Sharon Meyer is out in the cold.
It isn't windy tonight, but it is clear and cold out here. Now, unfortunately, last night we had quite a bit of cloud cover, and that was a peak for a meteor shower. Tonight it's going to be clear. It's not the peak anymore, but it might be worth it to look up at the stars. You may see a shooting star tonight. It is clear. It is cold, though. You're probably not going to linger too long. Marcellus?
Thank you, Sharon. This is a working farm, and we will be talking to the man who works this farm, Hollis Edwards, a little bit later in this bicentennial broadcast. But now it's time to go to Burlington and Will Michael for the latest on Vermont news. More news about those fires we have been telling you about all week.
Yes, indeed, Marcellus. Officials have determined the cause of yesterday's fire in Burlington that left 14 people homeless. The Burlington Fire Department says that pre-dawn blaze at this apartment house at Union and Buell Streets was accidental. Investigator John Vincent has ruled the fire started in a couch on the third floor, probably because of a dropped cigarette. 14 people escaped unharmed, though one firefighter was slightly injured. Brian Joyce now reports there are new questions about the other fire in Burlington earlier this week.
This is all that was left Tuesday morning. The rubble after Burlington's biggest fire in almost 2 decades. The pre-dawn blaze destroyed half a block of Burlington's Old North End. Two dozen people were left homeless.
There was no sounds of like fire detectors. I expected that would help wake people up, help us wake people up, and there was nothing. There was no high-pitched tones of any sort.
Brenda Kennett and Priscilla Letourneau were first on the scene. They roused the sleeping tenants in 4 buildings, probably saving their lives.
I didn't see no fire detectors myself when I was looking up, and then when I went upstairs, I looked for a light rose up there, and I couldn't find one there either. And there wasn't anything on the ceilings. I actually thought it was very weird that nothing was going off, especially in the hallways, where there was definitely smoke.
City records say the buildings met the fire codes. That means there were supposed to be smoke detectors in the buildings. The city fire marshal says he will investigate the detector mystery after he learns what triggered the $1 million blaze. For now, he says only that it was not accidental. Brian Joyce, Channel 3 News, Burlington.
And stay right here. We'll be bringing you much more news, including these stories on this Friday evening. Big budget problems in New York State, in Plattsburgh, where taxpayers are up in arms again, and also in Rutland City. Those stories and the rest of today's news, weather, and sports when we come back. The special session of New York's legislature finished its work early this morning. They made drastic cuts in state spending to bail the state out of its billion-dollar deficit. Legislators cut state aid to education by more than $100 million. They allowed the state university system to charge up to $300 per student more for tuition beginning next month, and they cut financial aid. They also decided to delay pay rather than give state workers an unpaid 5-day holiday, and they decided to tax hospital revenues. In Clinton County, Plattsburgh schools will lose $139,000, other districts thousands more. Plattsburgh State will feel the effect of the tuition increase and the elimination of programs.
So out of a budget of $28.3 million, with 90% being restricted, we will have returned by the end of the month approximately $1.1 million. So it is a very serious matter. We're undergoing a very thorough, inclusive, and careful program and activity review. We do think that there will be further shortfalls. The projections that we've heard range between $2 and $4 billion. What we've been dealing with now is a $1 billion problem.
With the tax on hospital revenues, the CVPH Medical Center will have to pay more than $500,000. The legislative action came just as the state is expected to deliver even more bad budget news, a $2 billion deficit or more. While the city of Plattsburgh, New York is trying to reduce taxes, some people called for even higher taxes at a public hearing attended by over 200 people just last night. City Hall has been the scene of a taxpayers' revolt in the past. This year, the city is trying to cut a projected 20% tax hike down to 14.5%, but still some don't mind the higher taxes.
That it looks to me like they're cutting not only the fat, but the vein. And we're going to do some bleeding. I, for one, I'm on a fixed income, but I don't mind paying another 10% if it means that the sidewalks are going to be cleaned.
Mayor Clyde Rabideau is attempting to cut even more. So far, at least a dozen city workers are expected to lose their jobs and the city's building inspector's office. City property taxes will not be going up in Rutland, but officials have not ruled out future layoffs. Mayor Jeffrey Wenberg said today the draft budgets of all city departments show that cost-saving measures are helping to hold down spending.
Unforeseen financial catastrophes, which are possible, but at this point certainly considered unlikely. We believe that the charter limit which exists today and which we are at today will provide sufficient revenues to continue to operate the city with principally the same services as currently offered for one more fiscal year.
Rutland City's grand list is expected to decrease and the inventory tax is still being phased out. City officials say they are facing a $300,000 shortfall, but are hoping to cover that with continued belt tightening. One of the themes of our Lamoille County bicentennial coverage is centered on the desire for local control. How that control is exerted differs from town to town. In Cambridge, as in other small towns, there are no zoning regulations. Brad Wright with more on that.
The Smuggler's Notch ski resort is probably what Cambridge is best known for, but Cambridge isn't really a resort town. There are some new condos on the mountain road, but not many, and neither the village of Jeffersonville nor the town of Cambridge cater to the vacation crowd the way that Stowe does. Yet last year, regulations designed to limit major subdivisions were defeated by town voters.
They were basically for major developments, you know, not single-family homes or in that area, you know. It was just trying to keep a control on it, you know, from a major developer coming in here and building a couple hundred houses all at once on us, you know, because it'd be a major impact on our schools and our services.
One farmer told us there's no real need to limit development in town. Cambridge is among the state's largest communities in terms of square miles, but development is naturally limited by many acres of floodplain and mountainside. And any new structures are approved through on-site sewage permits.
People have to come in and file for a permit to where they're going to build, you know, and then they'll make sure the land is suitable to build on. We know how many permits they are issued, and we're down drastically this year, so.
Sweet says the Cambridge Planning Commission is working on regulations that could give town government more control over new development if the townspeople think that more control is necessary. And Marcellus, right now, I guess that's a pretty big if.
Thanks, Brett. It's an if that we're going to be discussing with the man who owns these cows, Hollis Edwards. He's a member of the Cambridge Planning Commission, and now that the cows have been milked and the evening chores have been done, we will be talking to him about that very issue of zoning and development here. It is all part of our Lamoille County coverage, our bicentennial coverage, the First Republic, the 14th Star.
Republic 14th Star is brought to you tonight by Blue Cross Blue Shield of Vermont, your friends and neighbors working hard to ensure that all Vermonters have access to health care coverage, and by Union Bank of Lamoille County, 100 years of interest and trust in our community.
When Thomas Edwards arrived here by ox cart in 1836, Lamoille was a new county. The towns of Sterling and Mansfield still existed. It was the end of a journey that began in England. Since then, and Edwards has always been on this land. 80-year-old Iola Edwards came here 61 years ago, first to work, then to marry Hollis Edwards Sr.
How's it changed around here? I mean, is there a lot of new folks in now, or?
You don't know anybody. I don't know the neighbors below us here. I know them to speak to them, but I mean, not like it used to be when you used to be neighborly with everybody. But all of them, of course, that were here when I came here, they're all gone. All of them, everyone, every family. I'm the oldest of all of them that were here.
Iola's son, Hollis Jr., now runs the farm.
I don't think Hollis I don't think he ever drove a tractor. I don't think he ever did. We hayed with the horses, you know, and pitched it on with the loose hay and all that stuff.
Now, one of the family's old barns is a nightclub, and the Edwards' neighbors are mostly folks attracted by mountain living close to a ski area. Tonight, their 110-year-old barn is the site for Channel 3's Bicentennial Project.
Hollis Edwards is here with us tonight. Thank you for the use of the barn. It's a good site for a location to talk about exactly those problems here in Lamoille County, particularly in Cambridge. Your family came here in 1836 and has been farming here ever since. How have things changed in your lifetime in this part of South Cambridge?
Well, in the farming part, you've seen a great change from using horses to tractors, and now big tractors and big equipment, which takes more than half of the road. And from the development part, see more and more houses, more people. So far, the people we have living above us are very good. If the cows are in the road, they either turn around and go the other way or else wait for the cows. But some places, people don't want to wait for cows. And sooner or later, we're going to see the same thing here as we get more people.
22 years ago, I lived just down on Route 108 and used to drive into Burlington. Then it was only one A-frame on the mountain road where I was. Now there are 6 or 7. You're on the Planning Commission. There are also condos being built further down Route 108. Are those planned, or are those just sort of springing up?
They are springing up. They aren't planned. Right now, Cambridge doesn't have that much control. We have a town plan, which is a guideline, and that's about all we really have besides Act 250.
One of the myths is that the old Vermonters don't want zoning. They don't want that kind of planning. Do you?
We need it, whether we want it or not. We need some planning. If it doesn't get too restrictive, I think people can live with it. But
that's the problem, is you don't want to be too restrictive, but you do want to control some of the development.
We need some control, yeah.
It sounds like your cows are getting a little anxious for their evening grain, right?
Yeah, they're beginning to let us know they want to be fed again.
You have a hired man who works here.
Yes.
Your great-great-great-grandfather came over here as an indentured servant.
Yes.
You have 2 sons. Will they farm this farm?
I have one son who was interested in sugaring, but not in the dairy farming part of it. And it's hard to know what to do because we'd like to keep the farm in farming or keep it open. And
you hope one of those 2 boys will farm here?
I would hope they would, but I don't really think they will.
That's not a very optimistic outlook.
No, it isn't. No, you really don't know what to do. You'd like to keep repairing buildings and keep them in shape. We did a lot of work on this barn this summer, and it should be good for another 100 years. Incidentally, this barn is 109 years old now.
I hope that the Edwards family is still here in another 100 years. Good luck, Mr. Edwards. Thanks very much. Farming is not the only important industry here in Lamoille County. There are several other businesses. Agriculture no longer the dominant business. Alva Taylor tells us, though, that there are 3 companies that make the list of top 100 companies, and they are based here in Lamoille County.
A ski resort was among 3 Lamoille County businesses that made Vermont Business Magazine's Top 100 list last year. Although the Mount Mansfield Company's sales were $500,000 less than the previous year, its $13.5 million revenue figures were good enough for the resort to maintain 85th place. The firm employs 250 people in a town that bills itself as the ski capital of the East. Number 96 on the Top 100 list gets promotional help from a 1965 hit musical film.
The sound of music.
The real Maria von Trapp and family appeared in state travel promotion movies. Maria von Trapp died in 1987, but the Trapp Family Lodge in Stowe continues operation under her son Johannes. The resort had sales of more than $11 million with a workforce of 200. The Johnson-based Vermont Electric Cooperative sits just 1 spot back in 97th place. The co-op employs 51 persons and got into hot water because of investments in the Seabrook nuclear power plant. Last year, it sold $11 million worth of electricity, good enough to put it on Vermont Business Magazine's Top 100 list.
Well, it's the record center for the entire corporation. You know, they send their old records there, and when they need to be retained for whatever covers legally periods.
How did the archive end up there?
Well, I guess that the truth of the matter is, after World War I, then they wanted to get their business records out of the city of New York, so they found a place outside, and this is where they decided on. It would be reasonably safe, and it has been. I guess they figured it out right. Of course, they moved Plattsburgh in afterwards, but.
This Edwards farm in Jeffersonville sits just up the hill from the Brewster River, which is one of the many tributaries of the Lamoille River. Improving water quality along the Lamoille is one of the major challenges facing Vermont in the coming century. Tim Lewis traces a look at Lamoille County's pollution problems.
Vermont's Clean Water Plan found straight pipes and failed septic systems along the tributaries of the Mid-Lamoille River below Jeffersonville, although a new treatment plant is supposed to help. The Johnson Sewer Plant occasionally releases toxic amounts of chlorine into the Guion River. And bad stream flows are causing water quality problems in the Mid-Lamoille, just below the Cadies Falls Dam, and from the dam at Hardwick Lake, through the Wolcott and Morrisville Dam areas, to Lake Lamoille. The dam at Elmore Pond is causing water flow problems for a couple of miles downstream. And the stream below the South Pond Dam in Eden is suffering from poor flows. The state found the west branch of the Little River in Stowe still has stream bank problems left over from the '84 flood. Stormwater runoff from increased development nearby causes problems for the Little River, as well as some failed septic systems. Lakes Lamoille and Elmore both have algae, weed, and sediment problems. Those lakes and South Pond and Eden also suffer from large water level fluctuations due to hydroelectric generation. The state says more than half of the 179 miles of rivers and streams in Lamoille County have problems, and that 49 of the 355 acres of lake water in the region need work.
Water has always been a critical part of Lamoille County, an attractive feature. In the past, the streams and high mountains were, the high mountain lakes were potential power sources for the mills. Now their power comes from their ability to attract tourists. Be patient. Those tourists who are looking for their Garden of Eden, especially in one season.
There is very little that the town of Eden has a lot of. There's not much business, no overabundance of money, and only about 800 people. But in winter, what Eden gets a lot of is snow. In fact, more snow than most people feel they really need.
Good God, yeah. You don't expect anything but snow from here to breakfast and back again.
The season that is kind to Eden is summer. Lake Eden and the summer residents all contribute to a relatively quiet, relaxed atmosphere.
It's not a jazzy lake. You know, it's a lake that has kind of like a common people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're not looking to show anybody up, and they're not, you know, they're just regular folks.
Richard Curvello is part owner of the Northern Lights Cafe, which has seen at least as much change over the last several decades as the rest of the lakeshore. People know a good thing when they see it.
There's been quite a bit of building on the lake itself. There's very few lots left. The prices on the camps have skyrocketed. You can't get one for under $100,000 anymore.
While Eden's future seems fairly predictable, its past is under wraps. Hidden beneath the trees along Route 15 are hints about why this part of Eden is called Eden Mills. This foundation is all that remains of the White and Whittemore sawmill. It employed about a dozen people and is said to have produced over 800,000 board feet per year. Built in 1868, the mill survived until sometime after 1915, and then it was torn down. Now Eden has the business of recreation. Hugh Godin's campground is home for a lot of RVs in the summer. Interestingly, the majority have green license plates attached. While many tourist spots struggled last summer, this one flourished.
We've been really busy this year. There's been a couple of weekends that we've been full from wall to wall. And this weekend coming up, we're going to have a good crowd, too. So it's shaping up to be a pretty good year. Of course,
everybody else is complaining about it.
We only have 3 months to make it in. If you don't make it in 3 months, then you're licked, you know.
Godin says people in Eden are worried about taxes, but the Eden economy seems directly tied to the cleanliness of Lake Eden. Some are worried that Eurasian milfoil will someday be found here. That kind of problem could make Eden less attractive to everyone, but especially for the Boy Scouts at Mount Norris, who had a record-breaking summer for attendance. Will Michael, Channel 3 News, Eden.
Hollis Edwards says each one of his Holsteins produces about 30 pounds of milk, and they were just milked about an hour ago. Now they're really impatient for their grain. One of the highlights of trips like this, these bicentennial trips, is making new acquaintances and seeing old friends, the kinds of people who make Vermont unique, who make this the kind of state that many of us have chosen to spend the rest of our lives in. One of our teams who have been covering this county, photographer Andy Goodrich and reporter Brad Wright, have met one of those kinds of people in Waterville. She is one of those people who makes this state special. Tonight, they introduce us to Collis Brown.
After 18 years, I'd better not be nervous.
When Collis Brown needs to forget about life's troubling moments for a while, he takes himself to the woodshed.
Got to put my cheaters on. You hear the sound off from that chisel? That's how you tell if they're sharp enough. If you don't hear that sound, you better get the hone sound. You can be completely immersed in this. You're going to have a bad day and you come in here, you start doing this, and everything kind of comes into focus. And I've known of carvers that would start something like this, and they go to 1 and 2 o'clock before they even realize that it was past bedtime. You know, you just get completely involved in it, and the feel of the chisels and the smell of the wood and the whole thing. It's just very good.
What's also very good is Brown's final product, and there is almost as much quantity as there is quality. He's made most every kind of wooden toy or fancy wall ornament, but his specialty is relief carving. And if he agrees to do custom work, he can do it almost any way you want, as long as it's with wood.
Of course, I've always had a great deal of respect and reverence for wood. How I got into this particular field was, of course, I'd started with doing three-dimensional stuff, and it wasn't the thing that I wanted to do. And I started to do this, and it was the thing that I wanted to do, and I've been at it ever since.
Over the years, Collis has developed a technique for his carving that has driven his success. He calls it the V8 and the steering wheel.
For instance, the technique of this, you see this is your power here. This is the V8, this is the steering wheel. So when you're doing this, you can take this hand off anytime. You should be able to and not have that chisel move, because this simply furnishes the power, this is the control. If you're doing it with the opposite hand, it's the same thing.
After serving 20 years in the military and then another 20 in the Postal Service, Collis now carves at his own pace. But that doesn't mean his skills go unchallenged.
No, I like to do it for the purpose, particularly, I like to teach it, coach other people doing it, you know, and as far as I'm concerned, it's strictly a hobby type of thing. I get pretty good pay for my time when I want to work, but if I want to go fishing, I go fishing.
Collis Brown seems to have carved quite a niche for himself in Lamoille County. He was born on this hillside in Waterville, and it seems quite likely he will spend his final days here.
I guess I'm just content anywhere I am, and so I like the location, I like the view. We just never thought about wanting to live anywhere else.
And now that I, too, have met Collis Brown, I'll be sure to know how to pronounce his name the next time. My apologies. Waterville, where he lives, though, is also the place where Abnaki Indians have discovered some potential evidence of their long heritage in this state. The Abnaki's Material Heritage Project is collecting Indian artifacts in baskets. Johnson State College professor Fred Wiseman is also the Abnaki's ambassador.
This is a 1840s, 1860s period basket. Standard scholarship would say that this basket was made in southern New England. Yet this came out of a house in Waterville and has a long history of being indigenous to the Waterville area. Yep. So this painting, this design of a polychrome here, the alteration between the wide ash splints and the narrow ash splints is very distinctive, and places it well into the 1800s. So there's a good chance that this may have been made by Native Americans here in Vermont, working in a tradition that was pan-New England.
Sharon Meyer has brought a friend with her. You're about to do the weather, right?
That's right. I've got some help with the weather. This is Mouseburger, one of about 25 cats that we've seen here in the barn.
At least.
At least. She's going to help me out when we do the weather.
We'll look forward to that right after this. So you and Mouseburger are ready to do the weather.
That's right. We're here. We're ready.
She told you about the storm that's coming, right?
That's right. There is a storm coming up. Driving may be difficult over the weekend, but one thing that we have to keep in mind, you know, we complain about having some driving difficulty. You have to stay off the highways for a few hours or for a day.
It's not like as difficult as it used to be centuries ago.
That's absolutely right. Now, Sylvia Sprigg and I went through some old archives. We found a journal from somebody who settled in Wolcott 200 years ago, Seth Hubble. This is just one of the examples of the kinds of things he had to deal with when he settled in Vermont.
In the morning, I proceeded for home, came to the river. Not being sensible how weak the ice was, I attempted to cross, but here a scene ensued that I can never forget. When about half across the river, I perceived the ice settling under my oxen. I jumped onto the tongue of my sled, hastened to the oxen's heads, and pulled out the pin that held the yoke. By this time, they had broken a considerable path in the ice and were struggling to get out. I could do nothing but stand there and see them swim round. They would rise and struggle to extricate themselves from their perilous situation. I called for help in vain, and to fly for assistance would have been imprudent and fatal. At length, the oxen swam up to where I stood and laid their heads on the ice at my feet. I immediately took the yoke off their necks. They lay still until the act was performed, and then returned to swimming as before. One of them finally swam to the downstream side, and in an instant, as if lifted out of the water, he was on his side on the ice and got up and walked off. The other swam to the same place and was out the same way. I stood on the opposite side of the opening and saw with astonishment every movement. I then thought that they were helped out by supernatural means, that in the course of divine providence, events do take place out of the common course of nature. Others have the right to doubt my testimony, but in this instance, for me to doubt would be perjury to my own conscience, and I may add, ingratitude to my divine benefactor.
Tonight's weather is brought to you by Central Vermont Public Service. Efficiency today, energy tomorrow. Bundle up and save. For efficiency information, call 1-800-649-CVPS. Efficiency today, energy tomorrow. Run with a full load and save. For efficiency information, call 1-800-649-CVPS. Efficiency today, energy tomorrow.
We had a few flurries and some snow squalls dash through the area last night, along with some of the colder air. Most locations, though, reporting less than 2 inches of snow. In Burlington yesterday, we picked up just 0.2 of an inch of snow. For the month, 2.3 inches of snow is all we've had. We are falling a bit behind for snowfall this season. Yesterday, the average temperature in Burlington was 35 degrees. That is 12 degrees above normal. It gave us 30 heating degree day units. It has been mild so far this year. We've used 15% fewer heating degree day units for the month of December and 13% fewer for the season. On top of Mount Mansfield, the high temperature 23, the low 4 below, the present temperature 3 degrees. They've had 2 inches of snow in the past 24 hours, and there's now 23 inches of snow at the stake. Over in Saudi Arabia, the afternoon high temperature in Dhahran 81, and in Riyadh 79 degrees. Now that is obviously a half a world away from where we are now. It is definitely December and winter here in the Northeast. We'll take a look at some of those Northeast temperatures, and we find that they are quite low in the northern sections, particularly in Canada and over in Caribou. We have 6 degrees in Caribou, 5 degrees in Quebec. Those temperatures range on up to 35 degrees down in New York City. Now a little bit closer to home, we have 11 degrees the cold spot in St. Johnsbury. That's also the temperature we measured here in Jeffersonville. Most of the temperatures are in the teens in the northern sections to in the 20s in the southern counties. The low last night in Burlington was 15 degrees. That is the average for the date, and a record low of 11 below was set in 1933. Our high today, 23 degrees, that's 7 below normal, and a record high of 63 was set in 1901. Currently in Burlington, under clear, starlit skies, the temperature, 19 degrees in Burlington, the humidity, 62%, the barometer, 30.52 inches and steady. Winds are from the south, only 5 miles per hour, and sunrise tomorrow morning will be at 7:22 and sunset at 4:13. This has been the coldest night of the week that we've been here in Lamoille County. We'll take a look at the satellite picture. We have a lot of clear skies throughout our area. And we're also looking at a little bit of cloudiness now that's moving into western and central New York State. We'll put those clouds in motion, and we see some moisture that spread eastward across the southern part of the country today, but the storm system out west, which dumped 6 to 12 inches in the central Rockies, that storm system may be bringing a little excitement into our weekend weather. Right now, on the current map, high pressure is anchored over the northeast, bringing us our very chilly temperatures overnight tonight, but the low back in eastern Colorado is heading towards the east. By tomorrow, that low is over the Great Lakes. Snow is spreading into northern Vermont and northern New York State, with freezing rain to the south. So our forecast for tonight is going to be mostly clear and cold, low temperatures between 0 and 10 degrees. For tomorrow, increasing cloudiness, snow is likely during the afternoon, high temperatures 25 to 35. For Saturday night, snow continuing. It may mix with some sleet and freezing rain overnight. Temperatures will be holding near 30. That snow is going to be changing back, or rather the mixed precipitation, changing back to snow on Sunday, tapering to flurries, the high temperatures in the 30s. The extended outlook for the beginning of next week. There's a very hungry cow here. Monday, it's going to be dry, a chance of rain or snow on Tuesday, and on Wednesday, colder with flurries. High temperatures in the 20s. You notice Mouseburger isn't the least bit worried when all this commotion going on.
And during most of the weather, the cows were extremely curious, very quiet.
Maybe
obviously much more interested in weather than they are in news. They just know that J.J. Chaffee's coming up next with sports. That's right. The reason. Stay with us. We'll be back with more bicentennial coverage.
Back in Burlington, a little lonesome here with no animals to keep us company. Will you settle for the Bruins? Back-to-back nights against the Hartford Whalers. Back-to-back victories for the Boston Bruins. Last night, 8-2 mauling is good enough for a 5-point Adams Division lead. The Bruins now lead Montreal by 5 points. The Habs are in Winnipeg waiting for tomorrow night's game against the Jets. They tuned up last night with a good old-fashioned brawl outside a nightclub. No Patriots involved. Shane Corson, Mike Keene, and Brian Scrudlin were all arrested along with 2 Winnipeg men for causing a disturbance and fighting. An argument started inside, the men outside. They went outside, that is. The fight broke out, according to a witness. They all suffered cuts and bruises. A court date is set for January 4th. Well, the Philadelphia Flyers went into last night's game against the New York Islanders, having won just 1 game in their last 5. They came out of this one no better off, as they had to settle for a 2-2 tie. But it was good enough to pull within 2 points of the idle first-place New York Rangers in the Patrick Division. And scores. Well, this is a game that you circle on your calendar. The Boston Celtics host the Detroit Pistons tonight at Boston Garden. The 2-time defending champion Pistons enter the game a half game behind Milwaukee in the Central Division race. The Celtics are 3 up on Philadelphia in the Atlantic Division. Not a lot of good feelings between these 2 teams. That's just the way everyone likes it. The New York Knicks went into Minnesota last night to take out a pack of howling Timberwolves. They made it rough at times. Then again, nothing has been easy for the Knicks this year. Rice High School has already been tabbed as the team to beat in the Metro basketball race this year, but last night, Southern Representative Mount St. Joseph gave the Indians all they could handle. For a while, that is. But it wasn't pretty for the Mounties, and head coach Dave Kinsman in the early going. Bernie Saplicki takes the pass, and he'll jam it home. 14-4 Rice run to open up. But Saplicki, the key for Rice, went 4 for 24 in the second quarter, leading to an MSJ run. Ryan Birkenhead hit the short jumper, and the Mounties trailed by just 1 at the break, 27-26. Rice controlled the second. John Howe with the jumper. Indians led 10-3 by 10 after 3. Saplicki with 36 points on the night for Rice, including 7 3-pointers. Rice wins going away 76-57. Still to come, the changing of the guard continues in Boston. Details coming up. It was a sad day in Red Sox history. A guy who was the heart of this team for a long time was placed on waivers for the purpose of giving him his release. Second baseman, Marty Barrett. Barrett lost his job to the duo of Jody Reed and Luis Rivera last season. It didn't sit well with Barrett, who still thought he could play the game. A lot of other people think so, too. Barrett coming off a knee injury the previous season and was never really given a shot to compete for the starting job. The 32-year-old Barrett played in just 62 games last year, hitting .226. He's a lifetime .278 hitter. He'll be paid $1 million just the same. He had a 2-year, $2 million contract. The Green Bay Packers may make the playoffs as a wild card team this year, but there'll be no magic to help them out. The injury is not expected to threaten Mikowski's career. The newest of the rich sporting events is taking place this week. $6 million in prize money on the line in the Grand Slam Cup in Munich, Germany. Victory. You can tell a lot about people by the way they play. There are a couple of recreational events in Lamoille County that seem to help highlight the diverse and yet similar nature of the people who live and play there.
On the surface, the Muckers
coming up on his near side. Brings it under the neck.
And the Chuckas in Lamoille County would seem to have little in common. And yet, both sports feature high-priced horsepower.
This club level of play, you're looking $5, $15, perhaps even $20,000 for a horse.
There's a Bronco lengthened out fiberglass body. This is a 454 with a 671 blower Hillborn injection.
Both mounts require constant care and attention.
Then you've got $1,000 plus to tack the horse up. Then there's you have to maintain the horse, vets fees and so on.
Both events are staged on what used to be farmland.
The field of play, incidentally, is 10 acres.
I mean, we still hay the property, all the field stuff. This right here is basically the spot that is not used for hay, you know.
They draw players from far away and crowds devoted to the spectacle.
Speed and the horsepower and the money they get in the rigs.
Competitors say camaraderie is an important part of why they do this.
I think it's meeting people and getting to know each other, and polo is such a good passport.
Everybody's friendly with each other. You basically, who can build a better machine.
And both are looking to develop a larger Vermont following for their sports.
And next year we're going to put the Grand National on. So that's going to be 2 days.
Despite their similar natures, it's doubtful there will ever be combination tickets for the Stowe Polo Club matches and the Johnson Mud Bottom.
Tim Lewis, Channel 3 News.
And both are certainly a lot of fun. One final sports note in skiing. Wendy Reeves of Hanover, New Hampshire won today's Continental Cup cross-country race in Ontario. She finished ahead of fellow American Nina Kempel of Anchorage, Alaska. In the men's race, Italian Francesco Simonzato was the winner. And we'll go back to Lamoille County for one final look. Have a good weekend.
She wants to go home with you, Dick.
First Republic 14th Star has been brought to you by Union Bank of Lamoille County. 100 years of interest and trust in our community. And by Blue Cross Blue Shield of Vermont. Your friends and neighbors working hard to ensure that all Vermonters have access to health care coverage.
We have talked a lot this week about surviving adversity, making a go of it in very unlikely places here in Vermont. That's part of the tradition on a Vermont farm, making a go of it. It's also a part of the tradition in Lamoille County. It's part of the tradition of Vermont. Consider the story of Charles Haskell. He operated a general store in the Lamoille County town of Walcott early in this century. He was very successful. They said he had everything. He brought it in by the freight car load on the St. J and LC Railroad. There's the story of a couple of wise guys who came in and said, "Oh yeah, you think you have everything? How about a camel saddle? A saddle for a camel." What were they going to do with that in Lamoille County? Well, Mr. Haskell looked around in the back room, and sure enough, after poking around for a bit, he came up with a saddle for a camel. He died back in 1929, but there is another merchant in Walcott who is making a success of his business. You know the store. You also know the ads for the store. Bring your truck, bring your rope, bring your wallet. But you probably don't know the woman behind that voice.
When you drive through Wolcott, Buck's Furniture Store is hard to miss. But even if you've never driven by, chances are this place has still touched your life.
Wake up, Vermont. Now is the time to bring your truck, bring your rope, bring your van, bring your cash, bring your trade. Don't forget your mother-in-law. Get to Buck's Furniture Walcott today.
The voice in those unforgettable ads belongs to Sandy Buck, the daughter of owner Floyd Buck.
Bedding, recliners, carpet, wall units, you name it.
Do you have to do anything special to get that out?
No, it's my split personality. It just kind of happens when I get in front of a microphone, I can do it. Otherwise, I'm very meek, very mild, very calm, and very shy.
Buck's began as a grocery store back in 1957. But then Floyd Buck started to sell used furniture, and he gradually went up to new furniture. As the business expanded, he bought up neighboring buildings. Soon, Buck's dominated the landscape in the center of town.
Well, that may be, but it really has no effect on the town whatsoever, I don't think. Although I would put maybe a emphasis in there, people in Wolcott like me, because several years ago I ran for the Senate, just for the fun of it more than anything else, and I got 1/2 or 1/10 or 1% of the vote in the county, but I did carry Wolcott. So much so the people of Wolcott, I guess, can stand me, put it that way. But the people in Stowe can't stand me at all.
Buck has been ornery with other people, too. He had a battle with the state over blue laws and a memorable confrontation with tax auditors.
You just locked him in the room.
I didn't really lock him, they shut the door. Turned out the light, shut the door. Took the light bulbs out and shut the door. I guess you frightened him quite a bit.
You said something, I heard that you may have said, well, you can audit my books, but I don't have to give you the light to do it?
I guess that's what I said.
Sandy Buck sees things a little differently than her dad. She's concerned about what people are doing in her community, and she worries about other small businesses.
I'm wondering how much consolidation there'll be, how many, if there'll all be big chains and very few independent merchants. If the big chains will gobble up the independents.
Someday, Sandy will take over this business, and while there may be some changes, other things will remain the same.
So bring your truck, bring your rope, bring your van, bring your cash, bring your trade, and don't forget your mother-in-law. Get to Buck's Furniture Walcott today.
In 100 years, they'll probably be talking about them just like they do about Charlie Haskell and the camel saddle. That winds up our coverage from Lamoille County, our second stop in our coverage of the First Republic, the 14th Star. We want to thank the Edwards family in particular here in South Cambridge, what most of us call Jeffersonville, for being our hosts this evening at this farm. We also want to thank the people of Lamoille County who've been particularly kind to us during this past week. I want to thank Brad Wright, who has done most of the stories here with Andy Goodrich, and Tim Lewis, who does produce our bicentennial coverage. And Sharon Meyer, it's good to have you with us. It looks like we're going to have one of the coldest nights this week.
It's not too bad in here. It's actually been fairly pleasant in the barn with all the cows around, but we are going to know the difference as soon as we walk out those doors. Cold night out there, dropping down into the single numbers for almost everybody.
It takes us just about half an hour to take all the equipment out of our setups like these, and it's going to be cold work tonight.
Okay, we'll do it even faster.
We probably will. We should also point out that there are a number of names listed at the end of this program. They are the people who have helped put this program and put this entire bicentennial coverage together. I want to thank all of them. From all of us out on the road and those back in Burlington, thanks for watching. I'm Marcellus Parsons. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
There's a jewel in the heart of New England, where the music I live by is born. She's a simple, sweet tune for the asking, and she's home. For the love of Vermont, for the warmth of her hand, for the freedom she shares with the souls of the land, where the gentle belong, where to feel is to be strong. She's bestowed her song on us all. She tells you to follow what feels right, gives you reason to love what you are. She's allowed me to live by my music and my heart.
We'll find some moisture, a little bit of